Very simply, I would call it greed.
Digging into Apple's reported $275 billion deal with the Chinese Communist Party.
They're paying off presidents around the world, whether it's academia, our politics, our economics. People are being compromised.
Today I sit down with Anders Corr, publisher of the Journal of Political Risk, columnist for the Epoch Times, and author of the book Concentration of Power.
In the past, we've had pandemics, and you did not have this level of individual control by the state.
Is the trajectory of history always toward ever greater concentrations of power?
Don't ever let a single freedom go. Don't give an inch of territory to the CCP or any other dictator or autocrat.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek. Anders Corr, such a pleasure to have you back on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you.
Anders, it's been a while since we've talked, and since talked on camera, you've actually become quite a prolific columnist. It's actually quite amazing. It's every day, every couple of days, I see a new article. And you wrote a really fascinating column on essentially Apple's gift to the Chinese regime, presumably to allow it to function within China's borders and continue functioning. Anyway, tell me a little bit about this reality.
Well, Apple apparently had a secret agreement a couple of years ago with the Chinese Communist Party to give them about $275 billion. It seems like about that in terms of forced technology transfer, development costs, and maybe some other stuff. It wasn't exactly clear from the reporting, but it's a significant sum of money. It seems to have been coerced. Right beforehand, China was not allowing certain things to be on the App Store. So it does seem like a textbook example of forced technology transfer. Also, before they gave that, to sweeten the negotiations, it appeared like a few days before they gave that, they put a $1 billion investment into Didi. So that was questionable too. It was the ride-hailing app in China that was in direct competition with Uber. And it was at a time when Uber and Didi were competing for market share in China. So it was an American company stepping in to support a Chinese company that was in competition with an American company. And you can see how the Chinese Communist Party is using its power to warp the strategic and tactical kind of abilities and approach that American companies take, that American politicians take, that academics take. It's quite remarkable that the Chinese Communist Party can do this so effectively without more pushback from higher levels of our government, our businessmen, our business people. It's very concerning.
One of the really fascinating concepts that you outline in Concentration of Power is this idea of a hierarchy that's that's leaderless, so to speak. Or maybe, it's not exactly leaderless, but there isn't, sort of one person out there pulling all the strings. And frankly, even in China, Chairman Xi is accountable to some extent to these giant, billionaire families that, it's essentially, as we know, a kind of a mafia-like system there. So he's not, he doesn't have, complete control. But it struck me as something that might resemble the type of, leadership structure that's developing in frankly, in the free world, right? Sort of leaderless concentration of power. Tell me about this. This is very, very, very interesting. I'm just starting to think about it, frankly.
Well, the idea is that shareholders are supposedly the leaders of corporations. CEOs are the leaders of corporations. But as you said, these top leaders have their own things that they're following. They're following their families. They're following each person is following someone else. So even a U.S. president, for example, is following voters. As you said, Xi Jinping is following billionaires and other power holders, military power holders in China. So there's a kind of a leaderless quality to the international system and the hierarchies that make up the international system. And what's concerning about it in a way is that as power aggregates, the leaders become disjointed from any sense of competition with other hierarchies. So they end up being able to do things that are entirely arbitrary, ethically without anchor. So you get leaders that are making decisions based, for example, on aesthetics. In China, it's disturbing that the Chinese Communist Party is so stuck on not only its political ideology, but its racial ideology. It's Han Chinese racism, really, against Uyghurs, against Tibetans. It's bigotry against other religions. And I say other religions because in a way communism is kind of like a religion. But it's bigotry against Falun Gong or Christians or Tibetan religions. It is this totalizing, aesthetic, homogenizing approach to politics and culture that is, I think, there is kind of an arbitrary aesthetic quality to it that's disturbing. And they're only able to do that because there's starting to be no competitors for the Chinese Communist Party within China, but also increasingly outside of China. Corporations, other governments are starting to fall into line with what the Chinese Communist Party wants them to do in a way that really should concern us. We should be resisting more. We should be seeing more evidence of resistance against the CCP that we're just not seeing. The G7, the world's wealthiest countries, recently met. They couldn't agree even on a diplomatic boycott of the Olympic Games when there's 3 genocides going on in China. How is that possible? Japan, Italy, Germany, France, they couldn't agree to a clear diplomatic boycott.
Well, yeah, you already kind of suggested the answer. So you go to the citizens. That's what we've done at the Epoch Times, of course, and we're so grateful for the many citizens who buy subscription or support us in other ways. It's the only way it works, right? So that's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, Trump is starting his own social media, which is absolutely the right thing to do. If Twitter removes you and your millions of followers, how wrong is that? How wrong is that, especially to a sitting president? It's unprecedented that a big corporation like that would, and something that's supposed to be a democratization of information. The internet was supposed to be a democratization of information where we could all have a voice, and those voices that were popular, would rise up. That's what happened with Trump. And then the corporation comes down and knocks him down. So we'll see. We'll see if Trump is successful in his new social media outfit, we have hope. If he's not successful, it's trouble.
Because we have hope because you feel it's going to be a democratizing force, basically, a disaggregating force.
It's a disaggregating force. You're taking power from Twitter, from Facebook, the biggest corporations, the biggest social media corporations that are trying to influence and control and channel the way we think about the world in a way that's entirely unnatural because they're removing dissident voices. And if those dissident voices are able to create their own media platforms in the same way that Epoch Times or NTD or all of these different platforms are doing, if they're able to be successful and survive and grow, then I think we have hope.
So really, your call to action is everyone needs to get busy. I mean, really, that's what you're saying.
People need to get busy fighting for freedom, defending the freedoms they have. Don't ever let a single freedom go. Don't give an inch of territory to the CCP or any other dictator or autocrat.
Well, Anders, thanks for writing The Concentration of Power. I think it's a very important book. I'm looking forward to seeing the next, the next columns coming out, obviously this week, given what I've seen before. Such a pleasure to have you on again.
Thank you.